All right, so today we'll be talking about ATP and ATP ADP cycle. So we will begin, of course, with energy flow and recycling. So you know this already though. The way that we understand energy is basically energy is the ability to do work. No, without energy, you cannot do work. What about ikaw if you have not eaten your breakfast yet? Just like those who answered kaganina no katong wala pa naka-breakfast, diba you feel drowsy and you feel like you want to go back to bed and you don't want to participate in the class. It's because you don't really have the energy for it. You don't have the source of energy for it. Now, energy is very important because it allows the organisms, it allows us, to grow, to develop, to metabolize, and reproduce. Basically, to carry out all of the characteristics of life. So, without energy, these characteristics of life will not be possible, or we are not able to carry them all out. So, manang importante sa energy. Now, there are primarily three forms of energy. You have your thermal energy, which deals with how atoms behave, no, if they behave calmly or erratically. So, if erratic kay ilang behavior, they're very paspas ka ilang movement within a chamber or within a container, then usually init kini siya nga butang, no? But when it's calm and it's kanang kuan lang siya, medyo static lang siya, no? It's usually cold. And then you have, of course, your chemical energy and then your mechanical energy. Mechanical energy is further divided into two. It could either be potential energy or kinetic energy. So, mechanical energy basically naglihok, no? Nag-move. If you remember that in physics, potential energy. So, just think about this, no? Naa si kuan dinhi, kisa may na dinhi, kuan ko na daw, si Arnold. Si Arnold, ganahan siya mag-skate. Skateboard, not skate. Ganahan siya mag-skateboard. And then, of course, when you skateboard, you have to go from the top to the bottom. Na siya. So, of course, when you go to the top, this creates a lot of potential energy. And once gani si Arnold kay, once ganina i-push ni Arnold iyang self pa naog, that will create kinetic energy na dayon because there's already movement. So that is basically potential and kinetic energy uh, in a nutshell. One is siya ang pinaka-simple way of explaining the difference between the two. So both of them are mechanical energy because again, they deal with motion. Now, let's look at thermodynamics. No, I think you've heard of the laws of thermodynamics. You've heard it in either physics or chemistry, but majorly, kuan ni siya, no? Majorly, both ni siya, physics and chemistry. Now, in the first law of thermodynamics, which basically is the law of conservation of energy, it states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. No, naalang siya conversion, or this type of energy is being converted into another type of energy, and then that's it. That is true for our universe, and that is true for our planet as well. So dili pidi nga naalay energy na mo vanish. Of course not. Naa jud nay conversion na nahitaboan na. That is very evident in photosynthesis, right? In photosynthesis, if you're going to write the formula of photosynthesis in a simple way, you're basically taking it water and then you're adding carbon dioxide. So basically, imong plant mag-absorb siya water from the roots and then carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and with the help of your sunlight, or basically daragikan ang word na photo sa photosynthesis, right? With sunlight, it is able to create sugars, no? So glucose and then oxygen as a byproduct. So simply put, this will be the formula for photosynthesis. Now, if you're going to look at photosynthesis, um, kining mga kuan dinhi, kining mga elements that are found in the reactant side will be the same as the elements that are found in the product side, right? Unsa may naa dinha, na kay carbon, na kay hydrogen, na kay oxygen. Same as the elements that are found on the right side of the equation. And by virtue of kung ano kanang by virtue of this law and the law of conservation of mass, um, this formula or this particular equation should be balanced. Remember, sa general chemistry 1, you learned that last semester, no? Balancing equations. So when you balance this equation, in ani ang itsura, 6 moles of water plus 6 moles of carbon dioxide would produce 1 mole of glucose and 6 moles of oxygen. So that is basically the first law of thermodynamics ani nga part, no. So ang kuan dinhi, ang energy dinhi is conserved. Energy is conserved, and also matter is also conserved. So energy is not created by the plants, but rather it comes from your light energy, and it is converted into glucose. That's it. From light energy to what is glucose? What kind of energy is this? Is it thermal, mechanical, or chemical?
Chemical.
Chemical. Okay, naulaw ko ni Ryan. Okay, this is chemical energy. So that is basically the first law of thermodynamics. But the thing is, when this conversion happens in nature, it's not always perfect. No, not everything. Not all light energy turns into chemical energy. There is like a light percentage of it that is being converted into another form of energy. So that is being governed by the second law of thermodynamics, which states that energy cannot be changed from one form to another without a loss of usable energy. So it's not really like 100% of it. Mm-mm. Just like when you light a candle, o kada maglight ka og candle, no? It's 100% when you, what do you call this? When you light a candle, 'di ba, the wax melts and then it solidifies again, and then that's how your candle will last you for a very long time. 'Di ba, inana na siya. But you will observe that nagmelt ang candle, yes, but not everything, or the amount that was melted is not the same as the amount that was solidified. So you will learn that in when that happens, kanang paraffin from your, what do you call this, from your candle, some of it gets evaporated and is there in the atmosphere, no, and the rest of it is being solidified as wax again. So that is the second law of thermodynamics. So all energy transformations are inefficient. It's not always like 100%, because every reaction loses a portion of the energy input into the surroundings. So there's always that relationship between the internal and the external environment, and there is an inequality there. You will also learn that in ano actually in general chemistry too, I believe. So what happens here is same happen in photosynthesis. This is the same example that I'll give you. Yes, light energy is converted into chemical energy in the form of glucose, but not all of that will be converted into chemical energy. So some of it will be released as heat energy. So sometimes your plants, not sometimes, but your plants actually release heat, no, excess, as an excess, or as a sort of like a um an accompanying energy of your chemical energy. So those are the laws of thermodynamics that govern the processes that we'll be talking about, like photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And there's another concept here, no, under thermodynamics, Gapon, and that is entropy. Now, entropy is basically what nature is. Nature basically is random. So that's basically entropy. So it indicates the relative amount of disorganization in a particular system. Depende sa what kind of system is it, what kind of system it is, no? So it is a measure of randomness, which is natural. Nothing is ever constant in this world. Wala man jud, no? It's always bombarded by a disturbance. So the more disordered a system is, the higher is the entropy. So let's go here na dayon. Di ata paligoy-ligo pa. Let's go to the ATP and ADP cycle. Now, ang ATP Uh, kung walay ADP, walay ATP. Kung walay ATP, wala sa ADP. So question, unsa kanilang ATP? What is ATP gani? You learned this prior ba atong third grading. But if you can remember, what is ATP? Anybody? You can answer in the chat. You can unmute if you like. What is ATP? What is that? Algene says energy carrying molecule found in the cells of all living things. All right. What about for the rest? Any ideas? Napailain? Ideas? Anyone? Okay. The principal molecule for storing and transferring energy in cells. All right. Breakdowns of food. Could be, could be. So basically, ATP is a source of energy, or energy. What do you call that? Energy currency. If you remember my analogy of that in the third grading, I think I told you how ATP is basically the energy source of your cell, but it is an energy currency as well. Wherein, yes, we utilize glucose as an energy source. However, it's not really the energy source that your cells are able to utilize because they are, number one, they're quite big and they're much more complicated than ATP. So your cells, because of them being very small, they have to convert glucose first into what they recognize as an energy source, and that energy source is ATP. Now, without adenosine triphosphate, without adenosine diphosphate, wala say adenosine triphosphate. Now, let's look at before we go heart to heart here, let's look at the structure of ATP first. Yung ATP, which is short for adenosine triphosphate, it will have a nitrogen containing base adenine, no? And it has a 5 carbon sugar ribose. So remember that kini siya kini shape ng pentagon. Remember when we talk about carbohydrates and the isomers of carbohydrates, and that is your glucose. One of them will be your glucose, and then your ribose kana sila. Yung imong glucose is a 6 carbon sugar, but in this case kini siya nga sugar, which is called ribose. It will have 5 carbons here in its structure. And then kay triphosphate man siya, it will have 3 phosphate groups. So bali ang phosphate is PO4 3 negative, and then tulo ka buok ana, 3 ka buok ana. So muna siya ang structure ni ATP. Now, what does this remind you of? What other thing or molecule, yeah, or substance has the same components, like a nitrogen based a nitrogen containing base. Ano siya? A 5 carbon sugar ribose, a phosphate group. Usay other substance ang naiinana. Like for example, naa siya'y guanine, cytosine, adenine, thymine. Anybody? What does this remind you of? I'll give you a clue. Tulo ra gyapon siya ka letters. 3 letters. RNA. Okay, RNA and RNA and molecule. RNA and DNA. Very good. And do you remember what those are? Unsa na sila nga biomolecules? What kind of biomolecules are DNA and RNA? What are they? Are they carbohydrates, fats, proteins, or nucleic acids? Very good. They are nucleic acids. And isomers actually sila no ang usa kay ang isomers sa kuan sa nucleic acids, isomers, the very basic unit of nucleic acids. You remember from the third grading concept? Kaka-distract ko sa akong kuan. Sa akong kakulot sa akong buhok na ako'y kanang usa ka buka straight. This one. Mm. Sa kitawag sa ilang isomers sa nucleic acids? Nucleic nuclei nuclei.
Nucleotide, ma'am.
Okay, nucleotides. Very good. So as you can see here, kini ATP, it has the same components, right? It has a nitrogen, nitrogen containing base, a carbon sugar ribose, same with your RNA and DNA, and phosphate group. So basically, ATP is a nucleotide, no? It is an essential to life, an essential component or compound to life. Now the thing is, kini ATP, kini iyang three phosphate groups, mo ni siya ang carry sa imong energy, particularly this bond right here. Now the thing is, kini magud imong phosphate groups, no? Remember, tan-awon nimo ang polyatomic ion niya, naa siya charged na negative. And then all of these phosphates will be negatively charged. Now, if you remember, like charges repel, opposite charges attract, right? So in this case right here, kini mga phosphate groups nga nag-attach with one another, they don't actually like each other because they have the same charge. Now the thing is, kining duha ka buo ka phosphates, the first two, they tolerate each other. No, they don't like each other, but they do tolerate each other. They're civil with one another. And if you're just going to consider two phosphate groups here, kung duha lang ka buok, that is ADP. But if you add one more inorganic phosphate, this will be the third one, kini siya particularly right here. If you add another phosphate, inorganic phosphate, and the bond is formed here, that actually forms your ATP. And this bond right here, this is a high energy bond. Okay? High energy bond. So if you add an inorganic phosphate to adenosine diphosphate, you're actually storing energy. So energy is stored. So in that case, when is energy released? So kung ATP gabito na siya sa atong cells so that it can carry out like a lot of processes like your active transport, that's one of them. How does it release that energy? How does it utilize that energy? It utilizes that energy by severing the bond. No, iyang i-cut ni siya. Now, remember, negatively charged ning tulo. They don't like each other. So, okay pa tong duha, fine. We're civil with one another, ano siya. But, nag-add kag usa, na murag, hoy, di na ni pwede, murag nanubra na ta. Ana, nanubra na ang mga maldita dinhi. Ana. So, these bonds are actually unstable, especially kining high energy bond right here, the third one, the second bond, or the bond between the second and the third inorganic phosphates. They don't like each other at all, so medyo unstable dyan na siya. So when that high, or when that bond severs, kung i-cut na siya nga bond, energy will then be released. So, kung ang ATP, gikwaan siya og minus inorganic phosphate, that will be the time that energy is released. No? And it will go back to being ADP. Tangtangan ni mong inorganic phosphate. So that's basically how energy is stored and energy is released from ATP. Now, how is that possible? So from adenosine diphosphate, which exists in nature, exists na dyan siya, na siya dun ha, Nala siya sa imong body daan ng ADP. Through ano, uh, through, what do you call this? Wait lang. Sorry. Okay. Through uh dehydration, that's a term that I forgot what I was gonna say. Okay. Through dehydration, basically you're removing a water, no? Through dehydration, a phosphate is added. Oo. Magbutang ka or uh, an inorganic phosphate is added to ADP and that will become ATP. So this particular process right here. This is an endergonic process. When you say endergonic, you're energy. Now, ang ATP, because again, the last bond between the second and the third inorganic phosphates, they don't really like each other. So when that bond severs, when energy is spent, an inorganic phosphate will be removed from ATP, and this process will now be exergonic. Okay, you are spending energy, or energy is released for multiple functions within the cell. So gitangtangan siya og inorganic phosphate mo balik sa ATP into adenosine diphosphate. So that's basically the cycle right there. So when does this happen? When water is present, no? Na ay water. Okay. Dinhi sa ADP to ATP, gitangtangan og water minus water. ATP to ADP, gidugangan og tubig. Just think of it that way. Or just think of it this way. 'Di ba ang salt, kung ibutang nimo siya sa water, it will dissolve, it will vanish basically. Or the basically the bonds, the ionic bonds that are in salt will be sort of separated siya. Think of it that way, no? Think of your salt as ATP. When it gets sorry, when it gets submerged or exposed in water, the bonds will break, and that will be an exergonic process. Now, there are of course when you make ATP, you will have three mechanisms to it. Okay. So you have your substrate level, oxidative, and photophosphorylation. So sa pangalan pa lang no, phosphorylation. What does phosphorylation mean? It's basically adding an inorganic phosphate to ADP. Phosphorylation. Now, let's begin with the substrate level phosphorylation. Now, I know that when you say substrate level phosphorylation, it sounds very complicated, but it's actually really simple. Basically, ang substrate level phosphorylation is physically adding a phosphate, like physically. Ihang na usa ka molecule, kanang molecule nga na phosphate, inorganic phosphate, naa sa iyaha, inherent sa iyaha, ni nakita niya sa ADP, ano siya, oy ADP, gusto ka ani? Catch chuk ana. So basically, in ana ang kakahitabo sa substrate level phosphorylation. And this actually happens in your glycolysis, no? Ma'am, unsa man na, ma'am, glycolysis. Mo na siya ang first step in aerobic respiration, or cellular respiration, which we'll be talking about next week, no? So cellular respiration. It happens in glycolysis because glycolysis is basically just breaking down the breaking down of your glucose and the production of ATP as well, and it gets the ADP there, the adenosine diphosphate, actually gets the inorganic phosphate from like physically added. It is being physically added to it. Ano siya. So this happens in the cytoplasm, kining substrate level phosphorylation. So again, substrate level phosphorylation is the physical addition of inorganic phosphate to ADP. Okay, that's substrate level. Now, next up, we have your oxidative phosphorylation. You will have a clue here. Damoy clue ani. Oxidative, meaning there's a presence of what? When you say oxidative phosphorylation, there is a presence of unsa. Anybody? Presence of oxygen, basically, no? Dapat na siya oxygen. Now, kining oxidative phosphorylation, you can actually see this in electron transport chain. When we talk about your um when we talk about cellular respiration next week, basically oxidative phosphorylation is also known as aka electron transport chain. Okay? Plus, apil na dala si chemiosmosis. Mamunsa man na mga words. Okay, don't worry about this. Now, what happens in oxidative phosphorylation? Now, alam mo, munsa man na. Okay. So this is the first part of photosynthesis, no? So oxidative phosphorylation actually happens in the light energy in the light dependent reactions in photosynthesis, and it also happens in the electron transport chain part in your cellular respiration. So what happens here? Electron transport chain or oxidative phosphorylation basically is naay electrons traveling in a membrane. Now because electrons are negatively charged, no, kining electrons, they would attract positively charged elements, right? It just makes sense because again, like charges repel, opposite charges attract. So in that case, ang ihang gina-attract ni electrons ani would be your hydrogen protons. Ayan. Ana. So, ang ginabuhat ni electron, nga nung travel siya through a membrane, is dalon niya, through attraction ha, dalon niya si hydrogen protons na wala sa membrane. Wala siya sa membrane, okay? Naa siya sa gawas sa membrane. Dalon niya ang hydrogen protons towards this part right here, kining ATP synthase. ATP synthase is an enzyme that acts like a rotor. No, more siya rotary motor. Got tuyok-tuyok. Mura siya, ina na bito, think of it like your lock, kana imuhang lock. Kana imuhang doorknob, ana. Di ba, muabri naman ang doorknob kung na yabi, nana. Inaana gihapon ng ATP synthase. Now, yabi man ni siya sa unsa. Unsa din siya nga lock man mga ATP synthase. What is it guarding? It actually guards your I'm sorry because this is photosynthesis. I'm so sorry about this, ha. I'm referring to electron transport chain. Sorry about that. Because this is photosynthesis, your hydrogen protons, sorry, will be inside of the thylakoid. So naa siya din nasa opposite side. But same gyapon ang principle. Same principle. Okay. So kini si ATP synthase, nagulat na siya din ha, lock na siya, no? And usa man iyang gina-guard, it actually guards your ADP and your inorganic phosphate. Mura siya na ay gate, no? Now, kining gate mo abri ra ni siya kung naay mo agi nga yabi. Na unsa man ang yabi? That is hydrogen proton, no? So, kung moagi si hydrogen proton dinhi sa ATP synthase, mo lihok ay mga ATP synthase, mo lihok siya, na open ang gate, and then kini ng gate, pag open niya, magkita si ADP o si inorganic phosphate. Hello, friend! Kumusta naman ka? Ano siya? And when they bond with one another, they will form, of course, ATP. So, kada agi ni hydrogen proton aning ATP synthase, na ay mapurma nga ATP. Ana siya. So basically, that is oxidative phosphorylation. It is the use of electrons. Ma'am, di ba ingon ka, ma'am, oxidative phosphorylation na ay presence of oxygen? Okay, na ay presence of oxygen But in photosynthesis, ang oxygen lang is being released as a byproduct. Okay, it's being released into the external environment. Whereas sa cellular respiration, oxygen would be the final electron receiver, or it will be the final electron acceptor. That's the word right there. I'm looking for the word. Siya ang mag-accept sa last electron. So yeah, it's like that. That is oxidative phosphorylation. It's the use of electrons traveling through a membrane and ginagamit niya ang hydrogen proton para moagi sa ATP synthase. Okay. So, kadang pag-agi sa electrons in the membrane, mo na siyang electron transport chain. Ang chemiosmosis is basically the pag-agi sa imong hydrogen proton to ATP synthase. Mm. So they always go hand in hand. Together na sila. So that is oxidative phosphorylation. I know that this is not making sense yet, but this is kani siya nga part na to sa ato ang overview, no. This is a way for you to sort of like familiarize yourself with the terms because you will be visiting them again when we talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration, but by then you now understand a little bit. Bahalag gamay lang. And lastly, we have photophosphorylation. Pariho gyapon ni siya. It's the same. It's basically this one, the one that I have discussed to you. However, it uses light. That's it. It uses light. So it uses light as a source. In oxidative phosphorylation, it uses a specific substance. Now, it could be FAD H2 or NADH. Mom, unsa man na sila? Okay, these are electron carriers. Ay lang sa muka panic because we will talk about them when we go to photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Kung sa photosynthesis, kini si FADH2 and NADH, electron carriers of your cellular respiration. Ang sa kuan photosynthesis is NADPH, okay? So that is for photosynthesis. Ay lang kayo mo kaguol because we will talk more in depth ani na mga concepts, no? I'll not talk about this anymore, huh? Okay. Let us check your understanding, though, be. Identify the terms being described by each of the following statements. All right. Number one, it is defined as the ability to do work or bring about a change. What is this?
Energy, ma'am.
Energy, energy. I'm just kidding. Okay. How about the others, though, be? Can you hear the cats? Nami mga iring. It's not our cat, no? Kanang mga iring dito naga-travel dito sa roof. Oh my God. You know, si Islag Away. Ano inana mga iring? Si Islag Away. No? Islag Away. All right. Energy, energy, energy. Very good. More energy, mas happy. Bitaw, just kidding. All right. Nakuan lang jud ko. Kanang, ma'am, ganun, kuan kay kakaron. You're so active. You're so hyperactive right now. Kita mo ng salida sa Netflix nga Old Enough. Oh my God, you should watch it. If you're not, unsa man na, ma'am, if na may Netflix, search this on Netflix and then watch it, please. I beg you. And then give me a feedback, okay? Ma-energize jud mo aning Old Enough nga salida. Anyway, so let's go to number 2. It is a stored energy whose capacity to accomplish work is not being used at the moment. Not being used at the moment. What do you call this type of energy? All right. Ano sa angel potential? All right. How about the others? All right, potential, potential, potential. Yes, potential energy. Correct. And lastly, for number 3, it is a type of kinetic energy associated with the random movement of atoms or molecules. It is a type of kinetic energy associated with the random movement of atoms or molecules. All right. Thermal, thermal, thermal. Wala na ilain. Ma'am, Telma energy. Telma energy, ma'am. All right. Very good, everyone. Correct. Thermal energy. Basta anything to do with like the movement of atoms, the randomness of it, the randomness of the movement of atoms, kuan dyan na siya. Thermal energy. All right. Well done, everyone. So, Ang next na itong concept is basically the one that we talked about. Di na ta kailangan magkuan ni magpaligoy-ligoy ani. Okay? No need to overly expound. So we know about the structure of ATP na, and we know about the bonds already. Remember, ang last bond ang atong isever. Remember that these three phosphates, they don't like each other because of their negative charges. No? Negative charges, they don't like each other. Okay, paunta sa duha ka buka phosphates, like, yes, we don't like each other, but I guess we can be civil. But then, nag-add man siya another one, another inorganic phosphate. Dili, naggubot silang tulo. We don't like you. We don't like, go away. Ano siya. So, this bond right here, that is a high energy bond, high energy bond. So when that is being severed or kanang nag ano na siya noon, gi-cut na siya nga bond, energy will be released. So you know that already. Do not you know that already. So in this case right here, kung ADP lang siya na IOH then no sa end. And when an inorganic phosphate bonds with that, kung na mag-add ka og another phosphate, tangtangon niya ang tubig. So na ay dehydration process na mahitabo when an inorganic phosphate is being added to ADP. Okay, remember that. Dehydration process, mahimo siyang ATP. Kung i-submerge siya in water, not really submerge, I think it's the wrong word, but when it is exposed to water, ang ATP, kung ma-expose siya sa water, think of your salt being dissolved in water, di ba, ma-dissolve siya, mawala siya, the ties are being severed, nag-cut ang mga bonds, therefore, ang ATP, nahimo siyang ADP, balik. Now, your triphosphate tail, again, is the part of the ATP that provides the energy, no? Just look at this GIF right here. That I want to give, or even this GIF right here, hindi siya. So, pag-cut niya or pag-sever sa tie, energy is released. And just to remind you, each is negatively charged, they don't like each other, and the breaking of the bonds, specifically the last bond, will release a lot of energy. What exactly is ATP for? Now remember, katong sa atong third grading, no, that was a question in your unit exam when I asked na what type of cells would have more mitochondrion? Unsa yung answer ato? What type of cells in our body would have more mitochondria than any other cell in the body, any other type of cell? Unsa yung answer ato? What type of cells would have more mitochondria? Anybody? It's so hot. It's so hot today. Philippine summer is here. Anybody? What type of cells would have more mitochondria than any other type of cell? Anybody? STEM 4? Gusto nyo answer ato sa unit exam? Wala na mo kadamdam. Muscle cells. Okay. Aside from muscle cells, napabaylain? Aside from the muscle cells, will there be more? Na ganong nakaingon man mo nga muscle cells. Why? Or why would they have like more mitochondria? Aside from the muscle cells, actually apil din ha inyong nerve cells, no? What's in common between the muscle and the nerve cells? What's the deal? Why would they have more mitochondria than, let's say, your skin cells or your skin cells? Skin cells ako mauna-unaan karon. I'm sorry. Why would they have like more? It needs more energy. Okay, so what does ang mitochondrion manggod ninyo? Your mitochondria in itself, it produces the bulk of ATP, no? Your cytoplasm can produce ATP, yes, but gamay ra di kaayo. Ang mitochondrion, basically, because you dub it as like the powerhouse of the cell. It basically produces a lot of your ATP. Now, your muscle cells and your nerve cells, they will have more mitochondria because remember, your muscle cells, your muscles will have to function like 24/7. Cardiac muscles 24/7. Your your smooth muscles, they will need to function involuntarily, so can you just imagine? And the amount of energy that you use bodybuilding, exercising, there's a lot of energy, so that's why your muscle cells will have to use that. So more ATP, more chances of winning, more processes being carried out. Same with your nerve cells, because again, your nerve cells 24/7 na ilang function. 24/7, 7 days a week, walang ka fail-fail. Kung mo stop na siya og function, na goodbye. Goodbye sa inyo. So ATP is very, very important for all of your cells, all of them. But majorly the cells that will have more mitochondria in them, your muscle and your nerve cells. And ATP basically is responsible for the mechanical transport and other chemical functions. So a lot of it. Like if you remember when we talked about that in sa katong cell membranes, sa third grading, we talked about how there's passive and active transport. Now, passive transport is nature from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So it goes down a concentration gradient. It's nature. But if you are transporting potassium, sodium into the cell, things like that, that is already active transport. Kini sila, it will require a lot of energy to be done because it goes against a concentration gradient. So it goes against nature. Even though, for example, if taas na kaayo og potassium levels sa imuhang cell, kung kailangan pa jud nimo og more potassium, it will try to get more potassium from outside of the cell to and transport it inside of the cell with a lot of ATP being used. Oh, so it does not matter. It does not follow the rules of nature because it goes against the concentration gradient. So when you go against nature, you will have to spend more energy as well. So in this part right here, kining ATP ADP cycle, I will not talk about these anymore. Happer nani siya sa inyong PDF file. So this is the one that we talked about kaganina, the exergonic and the endergonic reactions. So again, when adenosine diphosphate, kuan na siya no kanang kuan na siya og water. Oh, i-dehydrate na siya, dugangan siya og inorganic phosphate, that is an endergonic process producing ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And when adenosine triphosphate is exposed to water, hydrolysis, dapita, exposed to water, ma-dissolve siya, matangtang ang bond, no? Ma-sever ang last na bond. When that happens, that is an exergonic process or reaction when ATP goes back to being adenosine diphosphate. But again, energy is released in this process. So I'll not talk about that anymore, okay? Ano siya mag-next? Pag-next ba? So think of it this way. Mura bitaw siya, ang imuhang ADP ATP cycle, it's like a, ano siya mag-next? It's like a battery. Mura siyang battery. Like, di ba, when you use your cell phones, kanang fully charged siya from gabi, fully charged siya, and then you use it throughout the day, magkahinay, magka-spend ang imong energy sa imong battery, right? And then, what are you gonna do? You're going to recharge it. Same gyapon na siya. It's like your ATP ADP cycle. Your ATP, it will release energy, mobalik siya pagka ADP. ADP will need a recharge again. So, imo na sa siyang i-charge, dugangan na sa di mo siyang inorganic phosphate, it becomes a charged particle that is your ATP na said. So, pwede sa na siyang analogy. Okay. So, I'll not talk about this anymore, ha? You can read this in the PDF file. So, yeah. All right. So, let's go to the last checking your understanding. Identify the term being described by the following statements. Number 1, this nucleotide is composed of an adenine base, a ribose sugar, and 3 phosphate groups. Unsa gali ni siya? Best friend ninyo today. Mo ni inyong best friend today. Okay, ATP. Well done. I think it's very obvious. The number two, this process transfers a phosphate group from an ATP to another molecule. Mm-hmm. What about the others? Si Angel pa nag-answer. Mm-hmm. How about the others? Duha pa? Angel and Princess pa? Okay, yes. Okay, sige, tulo na lang. I'll consider. Okay, that's phosphorylation. Correct. This is the general term. Maybe you're wondering, asa atong tulo ka, no? Is it substrate level? Is it oxidative? Is it photophosphorylation? General pa man siya. Transfers the phosphate group from an ATP to another molecule. Phosphorylation. And then, this portion of ATP provides the energy needed by various cellular processes. Asa nga part ato sa ATP? Will it be the nitrogen containing base? Will it be the 5 carbon sugar ribose? Or is it the triphosphate bond? Sa tulo. Is it the nitrogen containing base? Is it the ribose? Or is it the triphosphate bond? Which of the three is a portion of the ATP that provides the energy? All right. Triphosphate. Okay. Correct. It is a triphosphate bond. All right. So basically, that's it for this morning. It was short lang. So this is just a familiarization of the process or of how we get ATP, no, from the processes that we'll be talking about tomorrow and also next week. So tomorrow we will continue on with photosynthesis. So I hope that you're ready for that. And then next week we'll continue with cellular respiration. Okay, so that will be all for this morning. Are there any questions? Questions, anyone, about ATP? Any questions?
There's none po, ma'am.
There are none. Okay. So I trust that everything is clear to you. Pero sige lang, kuan pa man siya, simple pa man siya nga concepts. No, I just want you to know about ATP and know about its intricacies so that when we get into the next topic, wala na ni sa inyo. Murag wala lang ni siya brush off. I remember this. I know this already. All right. So if wala questions, so let's call it a day. I'll be posting your short quiz. That's short quiz number 5 later this afternoon ha para unya na mo afternoon mag-answer so that you can focus on your class this morning and also this afternoon. Kung na may klase unya 1, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you have. But yeah. So I'll be publishing it this afternoon. So please do answer the quiz later this afternoon. It's just a short quiz on ATP. So that is all. Thank you very much, Stem4, for coming to our synchronous class this morning. I highly appreciate it. And let's see each other tomorrow for our further discussion or our first discussion on photosynthesis. All right. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a good day. Goodbye, Stem4, and see you tomorrow.